Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to talk about are IRAs protected from creditors? So let's say that you are in a lawsuit and somebody's coming after your assets. And so I'm just going to kind of write some of the assets that you might have. So here's you, and let's say that you have a car, you have a house, maybe you have some money sitting there in a checking or savings. So I'm just going to put checking. And you have your 401k at work. Oops. Yeah, that's right. 401k, and you have an IRA. And something happens. You get into this vehicle and you cause a big car accident. And so somebody's coming after you for the fact that you had a car accident. And you're worried, oh shoot, what are they going to be able to take? So generally speaking, when you start dissecting somebody's assets, you're looking and saying, are there any assets that just having them are going to create liability? And the only asset that you have that would create liability is possibly your house. But I don't see things that I would deem a risk asset. Like a risk asset isn't even your car. It's because you're driving it. The car doesn't create the liability. It's you getting behind it. So even if you borrowed a car, you still have that liability. It's you that's the liability. There's no way to protect you from you. All we can do is say, are there any assets that we can isolate? So generally speaking, your 401k and your IRA are already isolated from you. It is not you. This little checking account is you for sure. That's low-lying fruit. Your house, I'll give it a front door. So you see house. Your house has protection too. Like in certain states like Florida and Texas, you literally have an unlimited homestead exclusion, which means even if you got into a car accident with somebody who was making $1 million a year and you had massive economic damages, let's say that you really seriously hurt them or killed them in a car accident, you didn't mean to, but you have this massive liability and it's going to far exceed your insurance policy. Are they going to be able to take your house? And that's a question state by state. That depends on your homestead exclusion in your state and how much equity you have. But yeah, they can start looking at these things. What you end up doing is running into a scenario where if they're going to take a lot of your assets, you're going to go into bankruptcy protection. Invariably, that's what happens when somebody has so much personal asset or so much personal liability that it so far exceeds, like that if you were to pay all your bills, if you paid all your liabilities, it's going to exceed the assets that you have. And that's called becoming insolvent. And that's what you go to bankruptcy for, is to stop the creditors from coming in. And the reason I bring that up is because that's the answer to your question. IRAs are creatures, generally speaking, state by state. 401ks, if it's an employer plan, falls under something called ERISA and has better protections. That IRA is you're going to be governed by states. And depending on the state, it's going to either have protection, it's either going to be a protected asset or not. Almost all states have protections for the traditional IRA. Most states have predictions for Roth. But what ends up happening is if you end up going into a bankruptcy and you're in a scenario where you have that IRA, you are going to be running up against a limitation where they're going to say that right now it's about 1.3 million. It's just under 1.3 million. That they're going to say you can have protected retirement assets. And you would still be able to maintain that much in a bankruptcy. Now, the reason I throw that out there is because that's the worst case scenario for you. When somebody is pursuing you, their job is to get paid. So if I'm an attorney for the person that you hurt in the car accident, my job is to get a recovery. It's not to force you into bankruptcy where you don't pay them anything or you pay them a reduced amount. My job is to keep you solvent to a certain extent, right? I actually want to make sure my client gets paid. One of the worst things that you get as an attorney and you're pursuing somebody, you're the plaintiff's lawyer, is you get a bankruptcy petition. You say, hey, I'm going to list you as a creditor. You're just going to be in line with everybody else. And unless there's an exclusion, like it was an intentional act or it was fraud or something, you're going to be stuck in line with everybody else. And the first people that get paid are secured creditors, people with liens, like on a house. The home loan company would get that, and everything else goes into the pot with the exclusion of certain assets. And they're going to allow you to keep a certain amount of equity, certain amount of retirement assets, other personal property, and then they're going to start divvying up the remaining. And nobody really gets anything. Chapter 7 is when you liquidate. So I'm just saying that is the doomsday for the plaintiff's lawyer who represents the client going after him. Like now nobody gets anything, or they get a really reduced amount. So what they really want to do is work with you and say, hey, I'm okay pushing you up to the limit, but I want to make sure that there's, that I'm doing what's best by my client too. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at that IRA and they're going to see, and by the way, first they have to get the liability. They're going to look at all this stuff that they can see in a public record, which they won't be able to see these guys. And then in supplemental proceedings, they're going to be looking at this stuff. So you're going to have the conversation with your attorney. They would have the conversation with your attorney saying, hey, we believe that this is the amount of damages. And that attorney's probably going to drop, hey, there's not enough assets here. You're going to put them right into bankruptcy. And they're going to say, well, I can't just take your word for it. What are we going to do? How do I know? And they might say, I want to see an asset listing with a certification as part of a settlement deal, where they might say, hey, I'll take a lower amount than my total damages. I'll settle because I believe that you're insolvent, but I want you to at least fill out, not file, but fill out the bankruptcy form so I can tell that you're insolvent, so then I can be off the hook for malpractice. I can't just settle with somebody. But what they're going to look is they're going to say that IRA, is it a traditional? Is it a Roth? Is it a retirement asset? And when I say a retirement asset, do I have the right to continue to contribute to it? So if it's an inherited IRA, I may be in a pickle. So if I got it from my parents, for example, and I was the beneficiary, no, it's not going to be protected because it's not going to be considered the same type of asset, right? Because I don't have the right to put anything into it. I have to take a distribution over a certain period of time because it's an inherited IRA. Spouse, different story. So I have to determine what type it is. Is it a Roth? Is it a traditional? And I can say, all right, here's what protections are. You have to be able to do that. Hey, can they take the distributions out of these things? Sometimes people don't realize that, hey, just because they may not be able to go get there doesn't mean they can't stand out and say, all right, distribute it to me. What we know with the ERISA plans is that you have complete protection. They can't touch it. That's why you have the O.J. Simpson case where somebody coming after you, they can't force the distribution out of it. They're not even entitled to the distribution. It's a pretty lousy position to be when you're the plaintiff and you're going after somebody who has a pension or something like that. It's like it's not really available to you. So it's going to be frustrating. And that goes for the amount and the proceeds. So just saying that, is this qualified? Is it disqualified because it was from an inheritance? Is it a Roth? Is it a traditional? What state are you in? What state was the injury in? All those things start to play in to determine whether or not we can even answer that question in the affirmative. Yes, there's protections. Now that is outside. That's you doing something and them coming to get it. What about the IRA doing something? This is the part that sometimes people don't realize. I see a lot of IRAs that are self-directed IRAs. And they're self-directed because they want to put real estate in it, or they want to have a business interest of some sort where they're a passive participant in a real estate, in a business deal. And there's liability that can come in here. Here's the rub. Let's say that you're one of those people and you do real estate. You put real estate in your IRA. That real estate, remember what I said, it's called a risk asset? It's a risk asset. There's liability that can come. There's no box around it. They're going to come after the party that controls that. It's your IRA. You're the responsible party. And they can come after you personally. Because that IRA, you have complete control over. You could distribute all the monies tomorrow. You and the IRA, as far as they're concerned, is one and the same when you have liability inside the IRA. In other words, it's not going to stay just inside here. It's going to come out and boom, it's going to come in and get you too. And they're going to be looking again at your other assets. So if you're in that situation, you need to make sure that you put a box around this real estate. You're going to use what's called a checkbook LLC if you're doing that inside of a IRA. 100%. You do not want to own risk assets directly in an IRA. You need to make sure that there's some sort of vehicle that isolates the liability so that if something happens in here, it stays in here. It doesn't come out and get you and start getting your other assets. The other thing about an IRA, unrelated to the asset protection, is that in an IRA, and if you have debt, then you have something called unrelated debt finance income. It means that if I am borrowing money to generate income, it's taxable, even in an IRA. So if I buy a piece of real estate and I have a loan on it, even if it's the IRA, I'm a disqualified party, by the way, because it's my IRA. I can't loan it money. And I can't be on the hook for any money that it borrows. It needs to do it on its own. But let's say you find a lot of institutions will do this. They'll do an asset-based loan on the real estate. And let's say that it makes $10,000 a year and you're borrowing 50%. 50% of the $10,000 that it made is taxable as UDFI. You know who doesn't pay UDFI? This guy. There's no UDFI for 401ks. So if you have a traditional IRA, there's an easy solution. If you have a traditional IRA, you actually roll it into the 401k. You actually roll it into the 401k. And if you want to qualify it for ERISA, you got to have another employee that's participating into the plan. So you might want to set somebody else up an IRA and then roll their money into the 401k. You still have the right to fund it, you probably wouldn't unless you're going to let them participate. But you're going to try to get other employees in this thing so it qualifies as ERISA. If it's just you can't. But at a minimum, you can eliminate the UDFI. It's actually a pretty effective tool. So we see it all the time. You see somebody come in with an IRA, self-directed IRA, the custodian even set them up with an LLC, and they're so excited. They're like, I got this great thing. I'm like, well, you're paying a custodian, right? And you're paying UDFI, right? And they're like, well, yeah. Well, you want to avoid those two things? Set up your own 401k, roll it into a solo 401k. And then they're usually looking at you like, why didn't the custodian tell me that? Well, because you don't need them. You can be a self-trusteed plan. You don't need the custodian. You have to have a custodian in an IRA. So sometimes that's an issue. I'm not saying custodians are bad. A lot of them also do 401ks. But if you want to avoid the UDFI, if there is debt financed income, that's the way to do it. It's just to roll it into a different plan. From an asset protection standpoint, you have a pretty good amount of protection for outside liability, and you have no protection on inside liability. So you have to take that extra step on inside liability of setting up our friend an LLC to hold any risk assets. If all you're doing is buying things like stocks and bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, if that's all you're doing in your IRA, don't worry about the liability, right? But if you are doing real estate or things that have liability that comes with them, then please make sure that you're setting it up and using a checkbook LLC or roll it into the 401k. And the same thing, 401k would set up an LLC to hold any real estate so that the real estate would go in there. The only difference is that the 401k is not subject to the UDFI. So, conclusion. It's a little bit complicated. If anybody ever tells you, oh no, IRAs are always protected, it's not quite the truth. You want to figure out what's going on in your particular area. And are there any other considerations? Hey, I have a whole bunch of money. I rolled it into an IRA. Sitting there, I'm going to do real estate in my IRA. What should I do? The first step would actually be to talk to somebody to see if it makes sense for you to possibly roll it into a 401k so you can get rid of the custodian, whether you can start in, then whether you need LLCs to hold the real estate. Again, if all you're doing is a stock account or something like that, it's really hard for them to get through unless it's like California Roth IRA is not going to have the same protections, right? You just want to know going in so you could say, is there any exposure for me in what I'm doing? And just being able to identify it and then see if there's any steps you can do to remedy it. So again, like you driving car, no remedy. Make sure you have insurance, make sure you have an umbrella policy, make sure your assets are isolated. So if you have a whole bunch of, like if you have a huge brokerage account, you have a bunch of stocks and bonds, you might want to isolate those and take them into a jurisdiction where somebody can't touch it. That might be your solution. So you're just sitting here saying, hey, here's the problem. I can't stop it. So what do? Maybe I isolate other assets away. If I have retirement accounts, and I'll just make sure you guys can see this one again. This is our friend, the IRA. So if I have retirement accounts, you want to make sure you know what kind it is, where it came from. Was it a rollover from your work plan, or was it a rollover from a third party? Was it a parent's plan that rolled over? All those things are germane to whether or not there's actually protections. And then you can put together an intelligent plan. Hey, if you like this kind of information, please share it with other people. Subscribe, like if you can. If you want to be put on alert when new videos come up, click that little bell. And if you have any comments or you have suggestions for other content that we could cover, please put it down below in the comments. Thanks.